Hello, everyone. Dr. Eames here. This time I'd like to talk to you about a couple different topics with some demographics, basically about female occupations by ethnicity in the country and who's entering the workforce, as well as some demographics about income and poverty rates. Okay, this first table that we have here is talking about women in the workforce and where do they concentrate? What sorts of jobs? Well, we've got it broken down by ethnicity here. So certainly we can see that we've got Euro-Americans, about 42% of Euro-American women um, are really in the professional trades um, and so forth. You can see it, 42%. We find a slightly higher concentration of this with the Asian Americans, and then lesser amounts of African Americans, and the least amount of management and professional type of personnel in the Latino or the Latino American population. And we can see by comparison some of the other types of industries that we tend to see the most female workers right now by ethnicity. Sales and office jobs are still big. 33% of Euro-American women are working in sales and office positions. The same for very similar for African American and Latino Americans. Asian Americans slightly less. On the other hand, we look at the Asian American women, and they're slightly higher in the management professional category. So that sort of balances out, makes some sense. When we look at trades, industries with construction and maintenance, we really see that that's not where the women are congregated. A very low percent, almost nothing. Production and transportation, very similar, low amounts. It is interesting that transportation sector has the #1 job in the country. It's the #1 job in Missouri. It's truck driver. But when we look to women, we're finding that it's got to be men who are holding these jobs, because if we look at Euro-American women, it's only 5% of transportation production jobs and so forth. Now, production as well means manufacturing. So we've got sort of those two lumped together, but we're seeing that not as many women are in the transportation industries or in the factories making things as there are men. But when it comes to the service industries, we see that we have higher concentrations of females. In particular, African American women are concentrated in the service industry, doing various sorts of jobs, serving people, what we call today the essential workers on the front lines. 38% of African American women, that's where they're at. Less amounts with Asian Americans and Euro American women, but certainly high percentages also of Latino American women. Now, when it comes to overall poverty rates in the country, we can break it down by income in all sorts of different ways here. As you can see by the top row here, these are figures from the Bureau of Labor Statistics in 2010. We find that the average income for males, for all males in the country, was around 32,000. For females, look at that big difference, 21,000. Combined household incomes for all groups generally hovered around $50,000 a year, with a poverty rate of the entire country of around 15%. I think that has probably increased somewhat since 2010. That is an alarmingly high rate for a marketing sort of economy like we have, that we have so many people hovering around the poverty rate. Now, we can find out some other good information here from this chart. We look at Euro-Americans again. Their overall poverty rate is less than the total countries at 10%. And we can see that actually Euro-Americans have the lowest poverty rate per population size in the country. Asian Americans are very close on their poverty rate of about 12. But when we look to these three main groups here of African Americans, Latino Americans, and American Indians, look at this, they're 27, 28% poverty rate. So there are some large inequities in our society. We also see similar sorts of things with combined household income, whether it's one person or two persons. If we look to the Euro-American communities, their combined incomes are around 55,000. The highest group that we have listed here is Asian Americans at 64,000. But then we see again, these three same groups are a little bit held back, 32,000 for African Americans combined household incomes, um, 38 for Latino Americans, and 35 for American Indians. And then so we see correspondingly high poverty rates as well. So these groups aren't getting that opportunity to make as much money as other groups and so forth. When we look at workers entering the workforce by gender, that was one of the myths and statements at the beginning of this chapter. Um, and you can clearly see that 65% of all the workers entering the workforce today are women. So that's about 2/3 of workers. And then when we break down the remaining 35%, well, about 15% of those men are out there are Euro Americans, and about 20% of the other men entering the workforce are non-Euro American men, so other minorities. So these are some interesting statistics and demographics that do give us an idea of what it is like in America, the real America today. That's all I wanted to talk about this time, folks. I'll talk to you again soon.